Imagine going and looking at a dozen houses, let's say, with an agent, and then all of a sudden you start to feel like all this crazy pressure that you shouldn't be dealing with from the person who's supposed to be advocating for you. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about a bunch of hidden signs that you're not necessarily dealing with the right agent, and to be aware of those. Doesn't mean you can't use them, but you need to make sure that you are aware of what's going on and protect yourself. All right, I'm Saul Carter, and I'm here to give you tips and tricks about real estate. And let's get into some of my random ideas on kind of things you need to look for if you are out there buying yourself a home in Ventura County in 2026. All right, so what are we looking for? First one is that agent pushes you into a house that is either outside your price range or too much of a fixer, but it just doesn't feel right. And he's like, hey, no, you got to get this because this is the greatest investment of all time. Well, if you're just a first-time home buyer, you don't necessarily have the wherewithal to become a fix-it specialist and take advantage of all that potential equity. Maybe you'll find yourself into a home that is just like half done for the next decade because that's where you got stuck. So be aware and advocate for yourself. As a realtor, it's our job to find you the home that fits your style the best, but a lot of agents out there are just out there to try to find you the first home that you'll accept, right? Because the faster you get a home purchased, the faster they get paid. Now, it takes a special kind of realtor to be that patient one and always advocates starts to show things. If you get somebody who says, oh, that's not that big of a deal, or oh, that's not that big of a deal, and it feels like a big deal to you, go with your first instinct. That is a big deal to you, right? So next one is somebody who kind of blows off a lot of the little, kind of purchase expenses that are just start to add up. What does that look like? Well, that looks like, beyond your principal and interest on your loan, but that looks like, oh, there's Melrose. I just talked about that in a little video of this. So that's an additional property tax above and beyond. If they're like, it's not that big of a deal, or there's an HOA, or there's little deferred maintenance issues that you know that you're going to have to deal with that you just don't want to deal with, but the agent is like, hey, not a big deal, just don't even worry about it, because it's something that you're going to have to take care of after the deal closes, right? So we want to make sure that that stuff gets taken care of, okay? Item number 3 that you really want to watch out for, and it doesn't mean that an agent should not be a good resource for good people, but if they're really pushing you to use their people only, then that's a really big red flag that you need to understand where everybody's motivations are. Sometimes they have agreements to get paid when you use them, and that's fine, right? As long as it's disclosed. But if they're really adamant about, I'm not going to work with you unless you work with my lender, that is actually illegal. You can't do that. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have somebody look at, like, let's say you come in with a pre-approval letter already, but it's from joeschmoonlineaccount.com, right? Well, we want to verify that that is a good pre-approval. That is completely fine. That means that I typically do have a lender that I'll go, hey, you need to go check this out. If I can't get a hold of the lender that has the pre-approval myself, I want to make sure that I'm working for somebody who can actually act on what they're looking for, because there's nothing more disappointing than going and looking at a dozen homes and you find the one that you love, that you're within your pre-approval range and you're ready to go, and then turns out that the lender who gave you the pre-approval did not know what they were doing. Now, I always try to avoid that up front, but that does not mean that you have to work with any lender that I refer you to or I use as a resource to make sure that everything is all good. You need to make sure that you're finding the lender that you are comfortable with to get things done, okay? The other thing is that agent who keeps pushing you outside your budget. Now, a lot of times, speaking of pre-approvals, you'll get a pre-approval that, let's say, says $872,000. But your personal budget when you started looking was really, $642,000, and that's what you told your agent. But they know because you gave them that pre-approval letter. They know that you're approved up to that 800,000. And despite you saying, "Hey, I really don't want to go over 7," they keep pushing you homes that are 8 over and over and over again. And typically, buyer's agents and seller's agents get paid on a percentage basis. So the higher number they get, the more money they're going to get, right? And so within reason, that's fine. You want to be you want an agent who's going to represent you and show you everything you're possibly getting. But if you're uncomfortable over a certain number and that agent keeps sending you stuff that's above that certain number, just bow out. Check their brakes, whatever it takes to make you feel comfortable with the transaction, because you do not want to feel pressured into doing more than you really should, right? All right. Now, what's the next one on the list is? Oh, and this is something I actually have talked about before, but it's about the attitude, right? So there is a phrase that's going around that is basically you marry the house and you date the rate. Now, what this means is when you purchase a home, you can adjust that interest rate on your mortgage if things fall into the right place. Meaning that if you bought something and you're at 8% and rates drop down to 6, then you can refi and get down to that 6 range. But if you're buying a house for you to live in, you need to be 100% comfortable with that home as it is when you close. Meaning you're completely okay with the interest rate on your mortgage, you're completely okay with the mortgage amount that you're doing, and all those things all put together. Does that make sense? And so you don't want to count on the market shifting in your direction to make sure that you're able to keep that home in the long run. You want to basically buy something and know that you're good to go no matter what happens. Now, if you get lucky enough to refi down the road, golden, right? That's a great thing, but don't want to count on that as a strategy to, hold on until their interest rates go down, right? So, let's see what's next on there. Oh, one of the ones that I see all the time is people put as is on their listing, and their agent, just because it's easier for everybody, the agent's like, nope, it says as is, no repairs, blah, blah, blah. And the seller's agent says, oh, says as is, no repairs, blah, blah, blah. That is not true. Just because something says as is does not mean that you don't, as a buyer, have the right to do inspections and ask for repairs. Now, the seller is not required to actually do any repairs. They weren't, whether they said as is or not, but it intimidates a lot of buyers to just not even go down that road. Now, when I'm selling a house, the biggest thing that I want you to do is, whether you take action on reports or not, is to understand exactly what you're moving into. Because I do not want to see somebody move into something and then realize, oh crap, I didn't know that this had a septic tank in there. I didn't know it had, a gas tank under the ground that I have to get out of there for the tune of $100,000, right? There are things like that that can happen, and you want to make sure. Now, that's not your everyday home, but I've seen those things happen in transactions over the 20 plus years that I've been doing this. And you want to make sure that at the very least, you know what's going on and you're not surprised by something on the back end. All right. Now, this is more of a listing agent problem, but you need to have a buyer's agent who's savvy about it. Is if a property has been on the market for a long time, let's say kind of that 120 days range, and all of a sudden you're about to make an offer, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we've got multiple offers. And so they're basically trying to create some false urgency. So in order to make you feel like you need to, pay more for that property, or extend yourself or whatever. So just be aware and understand that that's a tactic. Now that tactic backfires more often than it does works, because it really puts people in a place where they just feel uncomfortable and they're not really happy with that. And it feels a little sketchy, right? And it's one of those tactics that has given realtors as a group, or real estate agents as a group, that used car salesman-y vibe, right? Want to try to get rid of that as much as possible. Okay. And then last but not least, if you're buying something and your agent's not running comps, as a rule, like agents should be experienced and understand kind of where the market is and everything, but that does not mean that they're not going to run comparable sales when you sit down and make an offer. An agent should not tell you exactly what you need to make. They can give you their opinion. They usually will give you a range, as I try to do, but they also need to provide sold comps and justify where the range is that they're good to go. And then the person that is making the offer is you. It's not the real estate agents on either side. So you need to understand what that number is and be completely okay with it, and then you're all good to go. So those are some tactics in there on that I see that you need to be aware of, that kind of I've seen some agents do some crazy things, and those are my top few that are, watch out for when you're dealing with an agent that you've never dealt with before and you don't have that track record and understand them exactly. All right, I'm Saul Carter. If you need any more tips, tricks, please subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks.